I'd like to welcome all of you to Book Passage this evening and thank you so much for coming out and spending your evening in support of your local independent bookstore. Isabel Allende was quoted as calling Book Passage the cultural soul of our community. And so she has a way with words, doesn't she? It's so true, and it's because of really wonderful patrons like yourselves, so thank you. This evening, I'm very excited to be welcoming a very inspiring woman to me. This evening's guest, Dr. Sara Gottfried, is a Harvard-trained medical doctor with over 20 years' experience, as well as a New York Times best-selling author. Her book, The Hormone Cure, hit a national chord and received huge acclaim and renown. She is also a certified yoga instructor and uses its wisdom to inform and support her medical practice. In her latest book, The Hormone Reset Diet, she turns her sharp focus to the topic of metabolism and offers a step-by-step guide to resetting its 7 governing hormones. The rewards are truly profound, and Sara has created a program that will not only leave you feeling fabulous, but also leave your metabolism healed and operating at its absolute optimum. So please join with me in a warm welcome for Dr. Sara Gottfried.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hello. So happy to be with you. I just was turning off my cell phone. And before I did, I got an email from my sister. She emailed me and she said, I just got this post. It's online and it's the top 10 books that every woman should read. And she sent me the link. I wrote the article. So yeah, my book is featured. But that's sisterhood for you. I love that. I love that. It balanced my hormones all over. So I'm so happy to be here with you tonight. I feel like Marin County is where I got my start in integrative and functional medicine, and it was the support that I had here as I shifted away from working in medicine. I'll keep that HMO nameless for now. And I grew this practice in Mill Valley, and it was just such an amazing experience for me. It was a practice that just fit me much better, and I felt like I could spend the time that I wanted to spend with patients and take care of them the way that I was really trained to do. So it's such an honor to come back here. And I was having a lovely dinner. I did about 9 things today to balance my hormones, and one of them was having dinner with Sandy Kleiman, who's here in the front. And I was talking to her about today. I've had this lovely hormone balancing day. And if you want to know more about what I did to balance my hormones, I'm happy to share that with you. And it's in contrast with yesterday, which was not such a hormone balancing day. It was one of those days where I didn't binge on food, but I binged on some other things. I binged on perfectionism. I binged on House of Cards. Anyone know what I'm talking about? House of Cards? My husband and I, 11 o'clock last night, we're like, why are we watching this? He is a total sociopath. Like, why are we watching this? And I binged a little bit on some victiminess. And it's, even with a lot of practices and rituals in place, it's still something that comes up once in a while. And it's why we have rituals, right? And why we have spiritual practices. So yesterday was a less good day, but today has been amazing. One of the differences was that I started my morning with meditation. I did a 10-minute meditation this morning. How many of you meditate? Great. We're going to make believers out of all of you by the end. I started my day with meditation. I didn't do it yesterday. And it sets a tone. It sets a metabolic tone for the day. Not just your physical metabolism, but also your psychological metabolism. And I also walked my daughter to school. And it's such a simple thing, but my husband and I walked my daughter to school. She had a presentation today. And it just makes such a difference to be so present with the people that you love and to start your day that way. And it governs the choices you make throughout the day. It's really pretty stunning. And then I went to bar class, and that was lovely too. But enough about that. I want to start with a time when I was a hot hormonal mess. And this was in my 30s. I didn't realize I was a hot hormonal mess. I thought I was just totally normal, and that my husband was the problem. So, this is page 11 of the book. In my 30s, I spent way too much of my time and brain obsessing over food and how to restrict it. I was a working mom. I plugged away during the day as a busy doctor and came home for a second shift of childcare and preparing a meal for my family. I felt a large void in my life, probably because I found the idea of having it all ridiculously impossible and exhausting. And I didn't realize that I was trying to fill that void with refined carbohydrates and glasses of wine. I was stressed, fat, toxic, unhappy, resentful, and inflamed. And nothing seemed to help. Even my blood sugar suffered. Tests showed levels consistent with early diabetes. My defining moment came in an unlikely setting, a Madonna concert. As she sang and danced for more than 2 hours, I was moved by Madonna's physical majesty, by the grace of how she fully embodied her feminine power. I had a flash of insight. Did I want to reach my highest potential? Or did I want to keep making excuses and stay on the same downward spiral of getting fatter, more burned out, and further from my inner vision of greatness? It was one of those moments of deep clarity, some even call them surrender points, that addicts talk about, where the pain of staying the same comes into sharp relief. I decided that it was time to take action and to apply my medical knowledge to help myself. So I wanted to start with that because I feel like if you know me, you know I'm a total geek. And one of the ways in which I'm a geek is that I love to obsessively measure. It's a way that I can track progress. It's a way that I can say, okay, this nutritional choice is different than this one in my body based on what happens with my blood sugar or my insulin level or my estrogen level. So I love to measure. I don't think it's everything. I think there's many other considerations. But it's a pretty compelling way to see what's true for you, especially from a nutritional perspective. And you may have noticed there's a lot of different opinions out there when it comes to nutrition, right? If you take a group of 100 nutritionists and you give them a pretty simple question like eggs, yes or no, you'll get 50 answers in one direction, 50 answers in another direction. And I think it can be so confusing to figure out, what's the right path. But often the right path is the way that food acts as information in your body. And I love to measure that. So when I was in my 30s, I was pretty surprised to find that I had elevated blood sugar. And what I now know is that I could think my way into prediabetes. I could take my thought forms and get to that place. Now therein lies the solution as well, right? Because you can then unthink your way to being a hot hormonal mess. So that's where this book started. In my first book, I didn't talk a lot about my weight. And I felt like my first book was about understanding why I was such a bitch in my 30s and how to undo it, how to deal with some of the depression that I struggled with, how to do that with hormone balancing, natural hormone balancing, And this book is about food and about how your hormones dictate what your body does with food. I had a conversation with Gary Taubes about this. And I had this idea. I thought, I think about 99% of weight gain is hormonal. And I said that to him. I said, Gary, do you agree with that? Because he's a skeptic. If you know Gary, he's quite a skeptic. And he agreed. There's quite a few hormone imbalances that lead to a woman storing fat no matter what, and women are more vulnerable than men when it comes to storing fat. But that also presents a great opportunity. So the first reset in this book is called Meatless. It's about resetting estrogen, which is the most important hormone, arguably, for women. It's also important for the guys. Just as women can easily become estrogen dominant, men can as well. And we live, I don't think you're allowed to come to Marin County unless you know quite a bit about the environment and endocrine disruptors and the ways that we are polluted with estrogen, even if you're careful about how you live. So when I was in my 30s, I went to my doctor with my list of complaints. I said, I'm fat, I can't lose the baby weight, I had 2 kids, I am stressed out, I'm depleted, what you got for me? And what do you think he suggested?
Antidepressants.
Ding, 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 yes. So he suggested 3 things. The first was, at that time, Prozac. And I don't fault him, because I was taught to do the same thing. I went through similar conventional medical training, and I was taught to write prescriptions for antidepressants at the drop of a hat. We're a little more rigorous about it now, but the truth is, you probably know this already, for mild to moderate depression, antidepressants are worse than placebo. They're associated with an increased risk of breast cancer for what they do to the liver. They're linked to weight gain if you have certain genetics. I probably have that gene. And they also rob you of sex drive, can rob you of orgasm, which I think is very important to us. So that was one of the things he suggested. What else do you think he suggested? Hormones, yes. So he suggested a birth control pill because that solves every hormonal problem that a woman has. Apparently well into menopause now. Not. So, I was taught to prescribe birth control pills, and I was not taught to give full informed consent, where you say things like, well, about 20% of women have a reduction in the size of their clitoris on a birth control pill. And it robs you of free testosterone, which can give you vaginal dryness. And there's the great irony, right? You're on the birth control pill to have sex, and it robs you of libido, and you have vaginal dryness. And often it happens in younger women who won't talk about it with their clinicians. So that wasn't such a great solution either. And then the third suggestion was, and this was so humiliating, I was shivering in his exam room. I had one of those pathetic paper gowns on, the kind. And I still remember this. He had a whiteboard in his office, and he stood up, he went to the whiteboard, and he said, Sarah, it's just a matter of simple math. You need to exercise more plus eat less, and that's how you're going to lose weight. And I at first I was humiliated, and then I was furious, because I realized that so many women were being told the very same thing, and it was wrong. It was totally wrong. So my hunch at that point, since I realized I wasn't going to get help from him or from conventional medicine, was that my hormones were out of whack. And so I marched from his office to the lab, and I checked some of my tests. I'd been fasting. And I found some interesting things. I found that my cortisol, my main stress hormone, was 3 times what it should have been. So this was early in the morning. My thyroid was slow, and I had low progesterone, so I had estrogen dominance. And I realized at that point that I needed to take on my hormones. And I also realized that there was no prescription that was going to save me. I had a hunch that what I did with my fork, and what I did with movement, and what I did with my thoughts was way more important. So that's what led to the development of the Hormone Reset Diet. I taught my first 21-day program to reset 7 hormones of metabolism, the 7 that women struggle with the most. Men struggle with them too. Women are a little more vulnerable. I offered that in 2008. And maybe some of you were with me back then. Susan, I knew you. Yes. So this was 2008, and it was interesting to me because I had developed this 21-day protocol with 3-day resets for the 7 hormones of metabolism. And I taught it one-on-one with my patients. But when I got women together in a group, it was about 10x more successful. There was something about the accountability of the group. There were some husbands there too. Maybe about 5% husbands got dragged. But it was about 95% women. And we've had a total of 5,000 women go through this program. And I already admitted to you that I'm a total geek. So what we've done is we've done quantitative surveys pre and post the Hormone Reset Diet. And we found that there's about 15 pounds of weight loss, kind of depending on where you start. Some women do it more for detoxification. You lose 4 inches on average off your waist, and you drop blood sugar by 21 points. Now that's the one I get super excited about because blood sugar is such an important marker of your health. How many of you know your blood sugar? Awesome. So hopefully I'll convince the rest of you to measure your blood sugar. Let me say a quick thing about that. I talk about it in the book quite a bit because I really encourage people, especially those who need to lose weight or just feel depleted, and that's about 91% of the women who come to see me, to test their blood sugar. Because if you wait for that annual visit with your doctor and you measure your fasting blood sugar, often you miss a problem with prediabetes or with wonky blood sugar. And let me just explain that for a moment. So the old standard in terms of fasting blood sugar was for your level to be between about 70 and 99. That's milligrams per deciliter, which is the units that we use here. We use different units in Europe. So 70 and 99. The new standard is to keep your fasting blood sugar between 70 and 85. 70 and 85. So what that means is that a lot of people who have insulin resistance have a fasting blood sugar that is more in that range of 85 to 99, maybe 105, 110. My fasting blood sugar was about 110 when I tested that day, when I went to see my doctor. And I was really surprised. I was about 25 pounds heavier than I am now, but I wasn't obese. I was, I had a lot of rationalization around it. I was like, I'm still postpartum. And my baby at the time was about 5 years old. There's a limit on how long you can use that excuse. So fasting blood sugar is really important. Let me get back to estrogen. I want to talk about my husband for a moment, darling husband. This is page 45. My husband loves meat. He knows the ethical, environmental, and health arguments against it, but he adores red meat washed down with red wine. He's not alone. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, meat consumption is at an all-time high. In the year 2000, we ate 195 pounds per person, and that's 57 pounds more than in the 1950s. Even though I think of meat eaters as being mainly men, I imagine cavemen circling a wild animal they just hunted and caught. it's fascinating to me how modern meat is the food that disturbs estrogen balance the most. Since women have far more estrogen than men, that means we're more vulnerable to the effects of meat and alcohol, which raises estrogen. Even if you're not a meat eater, start with this reset so that you can get your estrogen back into balance. So, I haven't seen many books that address the issue of estrogen in women. And I think it's so crucial because, after 25 years of practice, I've noticed a few trends, and one trend is that a lot of the women who come to see me have either high cortisol or low cortisol or some sort of combination, and most of them have estrogen dominance, even after menopause. I just had a neighbor think, she heard that my new book hit the New York Times bestseller list, and she came to congratulate me, and she said, that's so exciting about your new book, The Hormone Reset Diet, but I'm past all that. I don't have to worry about that anymore. And she's 58. And I said, oh, darling, you're not past all that. Like, it's never too late to reset your hormones. And what typically happens after menopause is that your estrogen levels may drop, but progesterone drops even more. And so there's still this state of relative estrogen dominance. And unless you're incredibly lean with very little body fat, your fat still makes estrogen. And then, of course, there's the endocrine disruptors that we get exposed to. So it's really important to reset your estrogen regardless of your age. My mother just sent me a book about early puberty in girls and some of the newer data about endocrine disruptors and the link with early puberty. And I feel like there's no age at which we shouldn't be concerned about estrogen, about getting too much of it. So that's the estrogen reset, and it's been kind of fun to talk about the meatless reset and resetting estrogen with three main things: giving up red meat for 21 days and seeing what happens to your body, increasing fiber. Fiber is like the unsung hero of the estrogen story. It's so crucial. There's just a study that came out that showed that 97% of Americans don't get enough fiber. They probably didn't look at Marin County. Because I know all of you get the fiber that you need. But fiber is really important for allowing you to use estrogen once in your body, which is what it's designed to do, and then get rid of it. Pee it out or poop it out. You're not designed to keep recirculating estrogen over and over. And so fiber allows you to get rid of it. The other thing that controls your estrogen level that is new and emerging right now, and I think a really interesting area, is the estrobolome. Such a cool word, estrobolome. So you probably have heard of the microbiome. The microbiome is the set of microbes in your gut mainly that outnumber human cells 10 to 1, and they interact with the food that you eat. They're intimately involved in whether you burn fat or store fat. And there's a subset of the microbiome that controls your estrogen levels. It's called the estrobolome. And it's a really interesting area for both men and women, because if you have a wonky estrobolome and you keep recirculating estrogen over and over again like bad karma, then you are at a greater risk of estrogen-dependent conditions such as breast cancer, endometrial cancer, ovarian cancer, even prostate cancer. So we want to be mindful of the estrobolome and how to take care of it. So you may know this already, but the Paleo Diet is one of the most common search terms now when it comes to food plans. Have any of you tried paleo? There's a few brave souls who've tried a little bit.
Yeah, or offshoot of it.
Offshoot of it, okay. So I tried paleo and I promptly gained 10 pounds, which, you don't want to go on a diet and go in the wrong direction. That never feels good. And I got really curious about this. So I followed a couple of different food plans, and I was interested, with the zeal of a scientist and also a slightly vain woman, to figure out why this was happening. And I have a gene that's actually pretty common in women called the PPARG gene. PPARG, they all sound like license plates, right? Like all these genes are impossible to remember. But this particular gene controls how you deal with fat, like the fat in your diet. And I have a variation on this gene such that if I eat fish, like especially wild caught Alaskan salmon in season, sockeye is good, compared to red meat, I lose weight. So fish makes me lose weight. It's the omega-3 in the fish and the way it interacts with my genetics that makes me lose weight. And it's that kind of specificity that I think is so interesting and part of what we're heading toward in the next 10 to 20 years of medicine. So unless you have tested your genome, has anyone tested their genome? Good, so some of you have. 23andMe, I think, is a great place to do it. You can do that for $99. You can't get the same kind of reports that you used to be able to get, but there's some workarounds that I can tell you about if you have questions about that later. But that's where we're heading. And I got curious about this whole thing with paleo. I'm not bashing paleo because I actually think it works pretty well for men, less well for women. And I have a friend who did a randomized trial of the paleo diet, and she found that women on paleo reach a plateau with their weight. And on average, they can't get to a body mass index less than 23. So body mass index is just a ratio of your weight to your height. And all of my clothes fit at a body mass index of 21 to 22. So I wasn't very interested in a body mass index of 23. And I just thought it was interesting that this randomized trial showed this. Not true for the men. So I have a lot of paleo friends, and they don't like the meatless chapter. Or they'll say, but I have bison on my land. Why can't I eat bison? It's really healthy. And I think the issue is, if we look at our paleo ancestors and what they were eating, they were getting about 100 grams of fiber a day. They ate a lot of plants. And occasionally they would have some meat, like when they had a successful hunt. And it was usually wild game, very anti-inflammatory, very different from what we eat. So it's, in some ways, I think it's apples and oranges. And we have to figure out what's true for your body. What's true for my body is that when I get off the red meat and I eat more fish and shellfish and more of a plant-based diet, it makes a big difference for me. I don't know if that's true for you. For the 5,000 people that have gone through my program, it was true for them. So I want to talk about another controversial subject, and that is chapter 5 in my book, Fruitless. This is page 99 if you have the book. Maybe you're in love with your stash of dried apricots, which contains 17 times the amount of fructose as fresh apricots. Fructose is the sugar that's normally found in fruit, but it's also added to processed foods for taste and preservation. You may know one form as high fructose corn syrup. Fructose consumption is at an all-time high in the American diet, and it is linked to problems with insulin and another hormone called leptin. How many of you have heard of leptin? Oh, many of you. Okay. Leptin is the hormone in charge of hunger and satiety. When you're overweight and/or experience blood sugar issues, fructose may become a problem when calorie intake is too high. In fact, fructose is 73% sweeter than table sugar, which makes it highly palatable and encourages overeating. Plus, it's processed differently in the body. How much fructose is too much is subject to debate and probably depends on your current metabolism, what you eat, maybe overeat, genetics, how much you exercise, and your fitness level. In my experience with patients, I found that 20 grams or less per day is ideal for a reset. Why limit fructose? you're probably consuming too much because 75% of foods have sugar added in various forms. And some experts argue that it's the primary reason we're fat. When you eat small amounts of fructose and your blood sugar is normal, you're okay. But if you eat too much, your liver can't process the fructose fast enough for your body to use it as fuel. Instead, your body starts converting the fructose into fats, sending them off into the bloodstream as triglycerides, and depositing them as fat in the liver and elsewhere in your belly. Other issues with fructose overload include insulin resistance, leptin resistance, and cognitive decline. Fructose excess is like the biggest slide at the water park on a hot summer day. When there are too many kids in line, it gets backed up. Then kids get impatient and they start cutting the line, wandering away, and jumping in the pool anyway. The result, total chaos. And in the body, it means you get fat. Are you having problems with the water park in your body? That is fructose excess and by extension, leptin resistance? Let's find out by continuing our detective work to see if leptin is your dominant hormone imbalance. And then there's a questionnaire in chapter 5. So I raise this because I'm hoping you're going to ask me some questions about the resets and how to modify your hormones with your fork. And I find that the two most controversial areas are meat and fruit. Because we've all been taught that we should have how many servings of fresh fruits and vegetables a day? 5, 7, 9, 11. Kind of depends on who you talk to. There's 100 nutritionists, they probably all say something different. What I found is that a lot of people are told have X number of fresh fruits and vegetables, let's say 9, and they're mostly eating fruit. It's sweeter. A banana, an apple. But just as our food supply has been changed by the agricultural complex, an apple in my great-grandmother's day, I feel so old when I say that. So I grew up with a radical great-grandmother who was a whole foodist, and she practiced yoga every day. She slept on a board. She was kind of impossible. And she would show up at our house in suburban Maryland with a suitcase of kale and wheat berry cookies. So you can kind of see that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. But an apple in her day had about 2 to 3 grams of fructose. It's like a little tart number, right? An apple today is more like a sugar bomb and typically contains 20 to 25 grams of fructose. So we've really changed the way that we eat. I'm going to take questions at the end. Thank you. So I just wanted to raise these more controversial areas, and we'll do some questions in just a moment. I'm going to talk for a total of about 40 minutes, so that's about another 6 minutes. Everyone good?
Yeah.
If you need to ststand up and stretch, you can do that. I'm a big fan. Did you know that sitting makes you fat and dumb? It gives you diabetes. Right on. If I had a prize, I would give it to you. So I'm really opposed to sitting, and it's such a big part of our convention. So I wanted to talk last about the 7th reset. This one's a little less convenient. It's the toxin-free reset. And it's aimed at resetting testosterone, which is a big problem for a lot of women. Too high, too low, causes problems kind of at either extreme. But this reset actually addresses more hormones than just your androgens, just your DHEA and your testosterone. It also addresses insulin and the problem of obesogens, if you've heard that term before. It's the name for endocrine disruptors that act on your hormonal system to make you fat, to make you deposit fat. And so if you take something like, bisphenol A, the devil we know, so bisphenol A or BPA, what's your number one exposure to bisphenol A? How do you get exposed to it? Plastic containers, plastic lining in cans. And then we've all been trained by the BPA-free materials, right? Those are just as bad. So the problem with the chemical industry, as I'm sure you know, is that these plastics are considered innocent until proven guilty, instead of the other way around. And bisphenol A acts on your insulin receptor, it acts on your estrogen receptor. It also causes problems with androgens, such as testosterone, and it slows down your thyroid via about 9 different mechanisms. So this is a really common one, and our number one exposure now with increased awareness that we have is receipts. So there was a study by the Environmental Working Group where they found that 40% of retail receipts are heavily coated with BPA, and it is the most common exposure. So when you get asked, here's another tip for you. If you get asked, do you want the receipt in the bag or do you want to take it with you? You put it in the bag, or better yet, don't even get a receipt. So folks who work at retail outlets have some of the highest exposures, and it's we've got to change that. So back to the book. So I want to talk a little bit about the science behind going toxin-free. So I've done these quantitative surveys, and I know that, as I mentioned, 91% of the patients that work with me have an issue with their energy. They want more energy, or they want more consistent energy. They want to be so depleted and fall asleep in 1 minute when they put their head on their pillow. 80% struggle with their weight. Another 80% struggle with their sex drive, but most of them would say, okay, help me with the weight loss first, the sex drive. And then about 69% struggle with their mood. So one of my jobs is to serve the people who come to see me, and that's what led to this particular program. So 80% of them need to lose weight, but 100% of us need to detoxify. It's just a reality with how we live, even if you're super careful. I used to have this fantasy that if I lived in a cabin in Point Reyes or Inverness, that I'd be okay. I don't have that fantasy anymore. I still have to detoxify. The science behind toxin-free. You are confronted with an astounding number of toxins each day, including pesticides, herbicides, genetically modified foods, and about 6 different synthetic hormones in meat. Toxins are lurking in the fire retardant materials in couches, the linings of tuna fish cans, face creams, prescription drugs, processed foods, as heavy metals in the environment, and your lipstick, even the air you breathe. The list goes on. The molecular sex in your body, that is, the interaction between a hormone in charge of your metabolism and its receptor, is disrupted by toxins. Ultimately, toxins make you numb to insulin and leptin, and they're linked to the development of blood sugar problems, lowered immunity, increased inflammation, stroke, and a vulnerability to autoimmune conditions. One study showed that a particular type of persistent organic pollutants, affectionately known as POPs, a class called organochloride pesticides, is linked to weight gain of 10 pounds over 50 years when you have high concentrations compared with people with the lowest concentrations. Your risk of weight gain and disease from exposure to toxins may be woefully underestimated. There is scientific evidence of a link between plastic-associated synthetic chemicals and heart disease, and the proof that they make you fat and insulin resistant is stronger. Taken together, the constellation of problems warrants application of the precautionary principle. Assume these toxins are guilty until proven innocent. A survey by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention demonstrated that 93% of the population has measurable levels of bisphenol A, a chemical that disrupts your estrogen, thyroid, and androgen hormones and is found in store receipts and canned foods. Endocrine disruptors have been shown to interfere with the production, transportation, and metabolism of most hormones. We detox to rid our body of the inevitable buildup of toxins that happen in modern life. A detox is the perfect antidote for resetting your entire system so that you can move forward with lightness and clarity. Daily exposure to environmental toxins can have a major impact on your health and can lead to becoming overweight. This fact makes me feel that the term endocrine disruptors doesn't go far enough. Xenobiotics, a term that refers to chemical compounds that are foreign to an organism, also seems insufficient. We should call them metabolic blockers since they block your metabolism and your endocrine system from performing their divine functions. I also call them party crashers because they were not designed by your maker to be in the awesome party happening in your body, mind, and soul. Detoxing is crucial for your long-term health. It boosts metabolism, helps remove estrogen-disrupting chemicals, improves thyroid functioning, and rids the body of extra toxins released in the bloodstream when you lose weight. Not to mention that you'll feel clear, clean, and energetic. What do you have to lose? So I wanted to say one last thing about the toxin-free reset. I'm always interested, I have like this sensitivity, this ear for when it feels like we're being fooled, or when it feels like a case of irony, or like life is totally unfair. And one of those situations is when you get exposed to endocrine disruptors, and we all have been exposed, and you store it in your fat, often in the belly, and then you lose weight, and what happens is your body's level of those endocrine disruptors, the blood level, goes up when you lose weight. That is such a terrible irony. So a lot of women, men too, when they lose weight, they then hit a plateau and they can't lose more weight because these endocrine disruptors get out of jail. They're stored in your fat, you burn fat, you lose fat, and your blood level goes up with these endocrine disruptors. So you want to be skillful about how to get rid of them. So one quick tip, since that sounds like a lot of doom and gloom, and I could feel the energy just went. N-Acetylcysteine. Do we have any fans of N-Acetylcysteine in the audience? So NAC, N-Acetylcysteine, it's maybe one of the safest supplements out there. I learned about it when I went through my medical training because we would give it to people who had a Tylenol overdose. So it's used to help with problems that are congesting the liver. It's a very safe supplement, N-Acetylcysteine. And it's also been shown to help you get rid of heavy metals. So it helps you make more glutathione, which is a super sexy antioxidant. It's the most powerful antioxidant in your body. Kind of gets rid of the rust in your body. And it's a precursor to glutathione. So most of us need more of it. So that's one suggestion. Of course, the book goes much further in terms of helping you with that.
Could you spell that though for me? I want to break that to N-Acetylcysteine, that one.
Sure. So N-Acetyl acetyl cysteine, C-Y-S-T-E-I-N-E,
Thank you.
N-acetylcysteine. So my favorite part of these readings is actually to hear from you and to get your questions and to really have some fun. So I would love to take your questions if you have any, and Johanna, is she around here somewhere? She's probably going to guide me and have me sign books at some point, but yes, hello.
So instead of taking NIC and AC, is it a good idea to take
Glutathione? Yeah, that's a great question. So glutathione, it's one of those unfortunate biochemical situations where if you just take the glutathione, your body mostly doesn't assimilate it. You absorb very little of it. And so it's a much better idea to work with the innate intelligence of your body and give more of a precursor that you're depleted in so that you make more of it on your own. The other thing that happens, this is true with hormones and it's also true with amino acids, and acetylcysteine is an amino acid. So this is kind of one of the reasons why I believe so much in resetting your hormones with how you eat, move, think, and supplement is because if you just immediately go to taking hormones without kind of cleaning up your body first, often you end up getting suppression. It's just the way that the feedback loops in your body works. So let me give you an example. When I first started testing my hormones, I told you that my cortisol was sky high. I also had really low DHEA. And DHEA goes on and makes testosterone, so I was low in DHEA and testosterone. I needed to address the root cause. I needed to slow down my production of cortisol and figure out ways to raise my own DHEA. And one of the most effective ways to do that, by the way, is heart math, which is a technique that I talk about in the book, based in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Some of you know heart math. So they've shown that you can drop cortisol by 23% and you can raise DHEA significantly with their practices. So that was a much more effective way for me to deal with my low DHEA than to just start taking a lot of DHEA. Because when I take more DHEA, it then suppresses my body's own production of the DHEA. So there's some situations where, like after menopause, for instance, taking estrogen and progesterone, it's a good idea because you kind of max out in terms of how much you can work with the innate intelligence of the body. But cortisol controls a lot of these other hormones. And if you clean up the cortisol and you clean up these other hormones, it's going to allow you to be on much lower doses and get a more sustained benefit from the hormones you do take. So that was kind of a complex biochemical nuance. I hope that landed okay with you. Yes?
I just looked at your website. Are you doing another guided 21-day thing soon? Or?
Yes. So, yes, to answer your question. So what I do is I teach this online, mostly because women do so much better when they get together in a group. Our next one starts on April 13th. And so if you want to learn more about it, it's mentioned in the book as well. The website is hormonereset.com/detox. hormonereset.com/detox. So the next one starts April 13th. And the interesting thing, I won't shut up about the science. The interesting thing about doing this program together is that when you do it with an accountability partner, and we partner people so that they have it, and you have a start date that's been shown to double your results in terms of weight loss. So weight loss may not even be your goal, but it's been shown to double your results. And I think that has a lot to do with women and oxytocin and our tendon befriend wiring, which is another conversation altogether. You can ask me about that if you want to hear more about that. Was there another question? Yes.
Hi. So I'm one of those nutritionists that have been telling people different information for a lot of years as the science changes, but now I've become my own experiment because very similar to your story, I was able to lose the baby weight, but then it just came back again, worse than pregnancy. And I'm in my early 40s. I found a doctor in Mill Valley who finally diagnosed me with low thyroid, low DHEA, low testosterone, high cortisol. But the first thing she did, once I said I was following a very clean diet, she said, oh, you're a nutritionist, you know what you're doing, was put me on Synthroid, which I've been on for a month. And I'm just curious, because I am signed on for your detox, how do you feel about doing the two together? Or would you recommend for someone doing the detox to be off of everything?
My recommendation would be to stay on what you're taking. And there's some debate about, what's the best choice for you in terms of any replacement hormone. I can tell you that the women that have gone through this program, so of that 5,000 that have gone through, many of them were able to come down in their dose on thyroid medication, or they were able to get off of their medication, but that would have to be in the context of testing your labs and making sure that you've got the right fit. The other thing that happens with the thyroid, which is kind of a drag, is that it takes 6 weeks to reach a steady state with thyroid. So it sounds like you eat pretty clean already, but if you're doing these 7 resets and you're resetting thyroid along with it, it's going to take you a total of 6 weeks before you reach your steady state again. So that's a point at which you may do some laboratory testing, and many of our folks have found that they could come down on their dose, or they could switch to something else, or T3 was the problem, and so they go on Nature-Throid, you know, something along those lines.
Okay,
And you can also ask questions about that as you go along in the detox.
thank you very much.
Great question. Yes.
So in terms of testing, you were recommending that we test our blood sugar, but you also said I wasn't testing my hormones. You're a doctor, so you know, there's a lot of things that we can't just order for ourselves.
Right.
Are these available, or would we have to go see a doctor to be able to get hormonal testing?
Great question. So the question is about testing your hormones, and you know, my ideal would be that you test a full panel of your hormones before you go through this program, and then test again afterwards. And it's not realistic for a lot of people. So to answer your question, there's a few different layers to it. One is, I think blood sugar is really important, because I think it's, we know that 1 in 2 Americans has diabetes, has a problem with blood sugar regulation, and I think so many of them just don't know. And they're irritable, or they're craving sugar, like they hear jungle drums if they don't get chocolate in their mouth by 3 p.m., and they don't realize it's the blood sugar that's driving them. So I'm really interested in that particular test, and it's also amazingly affordable. Like it costs about $10 on Amazon to get a home blood glucose monitor, versus about $200 to do a hormone panel. Now, if you wanted to do a hormone panel, there's a number of places where you can do direct-to-consumer testing, with the caveat that hormones are kind of complicated. I don't know if you've noticed this, but they're a little complex. It's not quite as simple as, oh, high cortisol, okay, let's drop it down a little bit. Like it's pretty complicated how to get it right, and how to get it right for you, which may be different than for you. So I think it's valuable to have a collaborative partner that you're working on this with, you know, someone who's knowledgeable about hormones and can do the testing and kind of discuss it with you and get into the weeds with you. But there's also a lot of places where you can test. Do you want a little list of some places you can go? I think this is in the book as well. So I'm obsessively testing myself, so I'm always trying new places. I used to do a lot of saliva testing. There were certain things I would test in my blood, like thyroid, but I would do saliva testing, especially for diurnal cortisol, a 4-point cortisol, where you're looking at it before breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and before you go to bed. And now my favorite is a diurnal dried urine test. So I just wrote about this on my website if you want to learn a little bit more about it. So there's dried urine testing is a lot simpler and faster than collecting saliva. How many of you have collected saliva before? You walked around with the tube and like spitting for forever. It feels like forever.
Yeah.
And it took a few days to get the damn test done because, yeah. So dried urine testing, you just pee on a little, a special paper, and you can measure not just your cortisol levels, but you can also look at metabolites, which is really kind of an interesting piece. And you can also look at, you know, how does your body process the estrogen? Because estrogen, I talk about it as if it's one hormone in here, but the truth is it's this whole family of a number of different hormones, some of which are quite good for you and some that are not so good for you. So I'm a big fan of dried urine testing. There's a lab called Precision Hormones, precisionanalytics.com, that does dried urine testing, and they offer direct-to-consumer testing. They also give you a 15-minute appointment with a naturopath with your results, which I think is pretty cool. Their price point is about $200. The least expensive place I've found in terms of hormone testing is a place down in Palo Alto, where this Stanford graduate figured out and patented this way of getting like a little aliquot of blood and then running all kinds of panels on it.
Oh, I read about that.
Yeah, I can't think of her name.
Yeah.
Can you think of her name?
Elizabeth something?
Elizabeth, blonde, I can see her.
Yeah.
Brown?
Glamorous?
Young.
Young. Yeah, so we'll figure out what her name is. But there's one place down in Palo Alto, and so I go on a field trip down to Palo Alto pretty frequently. Other places that you can do direct-to-consumer labs are ZRT labs in Oregon, and they also do some blood spot testing. Those are the main ones for direct-to-consumer. Oh, also My Med Lab, there's a number of them.
I think we have time for one last.
One last question. Yes, ma'am.
If you don't have soy or whey protein powder, what kind of protein powder can you? I've used whey for a long time.
And you don't have any problems with whey?
Well, I don't know. I have problems with losing weight. And I was just reading that that whey is not the best thing either. So.
Well, if you have a food intolerance, it can be an issue. Like I have a food intolerance to whey, and so I don't lose weight when I drink a smoothie. So are you asking what alternatives there are?
Alternative besides soy, which I don't think is the best either.
Right. I think soy in its whole form and fermented, this is another one of those nutrition conversations, right? Soy, yes or no? It's very complicated.
It depends. Yeah.
It depends. That's a good answer. So I think the whole soy that's fermented is often a good choice. But to answer your question,
Pea protein.
pea protein is a good choice. It's about 10% of people have an intolerance to pea protein, but it's less allergenic than a lot of other choices such as soy and whey. Another choice is hemp, or even making your own protein smoothies, like with nut milks and other forms. It gets a little bit tricky. You can get so precise and technical about what exactly is going to feed you the best. What I like about smoothies is that you can pack a lot of nutritional information into a smoothie, and it also seems to give some people bowel rest in a way that I think is hard with whole foods. So kind of depending on where you are, there's lots of people who eat whole food and have no problem. They never need a smoothie and they don't like to have smoothies. But I think for those of us who are trying to reset our hormones, it can really make a difference. So that's what I suggest. Pretty much everything has some detractors, like the 10% who don't tolerate pea protein. Other people just don't like the taste of it.
It's Elizabeth Holmes Theranos.
Theranos. Oh, good. I love closing loops. So Theranos.
How do you spell
Elizabeth
it?
Holmes. Theranos. It's lovely to group source the hormones that you need to think of these people's names. Pregnenolone is the hormone that helps you with memory. I better go check my level. So thank you so much for coming. It means so much to me. I guess I'm going to sign some books up here. Yes? Answer some questions.